Hi guys! Welcome back to Christy's Book Corner. I am your host, Christy Mason. And before we get into our book, can anyone guess what my hairstyle is? Well, I'll tell you anyway. It's Hazel from The Fault in Our Stars. I am being her for Halloween. Anyway, also, another good news. I just recently got promoted to part-time cashier. So I'm going to be in front end instead of clothing. And no more night shifts, yay! I get to come home at a decent hour and hopefully sleep in again still. Anyway, so let's get on with our book, Inkheart. And today's chapter is Chapter 2. Chapter 2, Secrets. Shh. Like my position, I had to keep quiet for a few days. It was early dawn when Maggie woke up. Night was faded over the fields as if the rain had washed the darkness out of the hem of its garment. The alarm clock sounded just before 5, and Maggie was going to turn over and go back to sleep when she suddenly sensed someone else in the room. Startled, she sat up and saw Mo standing by her open closet door. "Hello," he said, putting her favorite sweater in the suitcase. "I'm sorry. I know it's very early, but we have to leave. How about cocoa for breakfast?" Still drowsy with sleep, Maggie nodded. Outside the birds were twittering loudly, as if they had been awake for hours. Mo put 2 more pairs of jeans in her suitcase, closed it, and carried it to the door. "Wear something warm," he said. "It's chilly outside." "Where are we going?" asked Maggie. But he had already disappeared. She looked out the window, feeling confused. She almost expected to see Dustfinger, but there was only a blackbird in the yard, hopping over the stones, which were wet after the rain. Maggie put on her jeans and stumbled into the kitchen. 2 suitcases, a travel bag, and Mo's toolbox stood out into the hall. Her father was sitting at the kitchen table making sandwiches for the journey. When she came into the kitchen, he looked up briefly and smiled at her, but Maggie could see he was worried about something. "Mo, we can't go away now," she said. "The school holidays don't start for another week." "Well, it won't be the first time I've had to go away on business during the school term." He was right about that. In fact, he went away quite often whenever an antique dealer or a book collector or a library needed a bookbinder, and commissioned Mo to restore a few valuable old books, freeing them of dust and mold, or dressing them in new clothes, as he put it. Maggie didn't think she would. The word bookbinder described Mo's work particularly well, and a few years ago she had made him a sign to hang on his workshop door, saying, "Mortimer Fullchart, book doctor." And the book doctor never called it on his patients without taking his daughter too. They had always done that, and they always would. Never mind what Maggie's teacher said. How about chicken pox? Have I used that excuse already? Yes, last time, when we had to go and see that dreary man with the Bibles. Maggie scrutinized her father's face. "Mo, is it because of last night we have to leave?" For a moment she thought he was going to tell her everything, whatever there was to tell, but not then. He shook his head. "No, of course not," he said, putting the sandwiches he had made into a plastic bag. "Your mother has an aunt called Eleanor. We visited her once, when you were very small. She's been wanting me to come and put her books in order for a long time. She lives beside a lake in the north of Italy. I almost forgot which lake, but it's a lovely place, a day's drive away." He did not look at her as he spoke. Maggie wanted to ask, why do we have to go now? But she didn't. Nor did she ask if he had forgotten that he was meeting someone at midday. She was too afraid of answers, and she didn't want Mo to lie to her again. "Is this aunt as particular as the others?" was all she said. Mo had already taken her to visit various relations. Both he and Maggie's mother had large families whose homes, so far as Maggie could see, were scattered all over half of Europe. So they must be in Europe. Mo smiled. "Yes, she is a bit peculiar, but you'll get along with her all right. She has some really wonderful books. So how long are you going to be away?" It it could be quite some time. Maggie piped her coca, sipped her coca. It was so hot she burned her lip, and had to quickly press the cold blade of a knife to her mouth. "Oh, why would you do that, Maggie?" Mo pushed his hair back. "I have to pack a few more things from the workshop," he said. "It won't take long. You must be very tired, but you can sleep once we're in the van." Maggie just nodded and looked out the kitchen window. It was a gray morning. Mist drifted over to the fields at the foot of the nearby hills, and Maggie felt as if the shadows of the night were still hiding among the trees. "Pack up the food and take plenty to read," Mo called from the hall, as if she didn't always. Years ago he had made her a box to hold her favorite books on all their journeys, short and long, near and far. "It's a good idea to have your own books with you in this strange place," Mo always said. He himself always took at least a dozen. Mo had painted the box poppy red. Poppies were Maggie's favorite flower. They pressed well between the pages of the book, and you could stamp a star-shaped pattern on your skin with their pepper pot seeds capsules. He had decorated the box and painted Maggie's treasure chest. It lovely in lovely curly lettering on the lid. The box was lined with shiny black taffeta, but you could hardly see any of the fabric because Maggie had a great many favorite books, and she always had another whenever they traveled anywhere. "If you take a book with you on a journey," Mo had said when he put the first one in her box, "an odd thing happens. The books begin collecting your memories, and forever after you have only to open the book to be back where you first read it. It will all come into your mind with the very first words, the sight you saw in that place, what it smelled like, the ice cream you ate while you were reading it. Yes, look at the fly paper. Memories cling to the printed pages better than anything else." He was probably right, but there was another reason why Maggie took her books whenever they went away. They were her home when she was somewhere strange. They were familiar voices, friends that never quarreled with her. Clever, powerful friends, daring and knowledgeable, tried and tested adventurers who had traveled far and wide. Her books cheered her up when she was sad, and kept her from being bored while Mo cut leather and fabric to the right size and restitched old pages that over countless years had grown fragile from the many fingers leafing through them. Some of her books always went away with Maggie. Others were left at home because they weren't right for where she was going, or make room for new, unknown stories she had yet read. Maggie stroked their curved spines. Which books should she take this time? Which stories would help to drive away the fear that had crept into the house last night? "I know," thought Maggie. "Why not a story about telling lies?" Mo told her lies. He told terrible lies, even though he knew that every time he told one she looked hard at his nose. Pinocchio! that, Maggie, no, too sinister and too sad. But she wanted something exciting, a story to drive all other thoughts out of her head, even the darkness. The witches said. Yes, she'd take the bald-headed witches who turned children into mice, and the Odyssey with the Cyclops, and the enchantress who transforms his warriors into pigs. Her journey could hardly be more dangerous than his, could it? On the left-hand side of the box there were 2 pictures books that Maggie had used when she was teaching herself to read, 5 years old. She's been, and you could still see where her tiny fingers had moved over the pages. And right at the bottom, hidden under all of the others, were the books Maggie had made herself. She had spent days sticking them together and cutting up the paper. She had painted pictures after picture, and Mo had to write what they were underneath them. An angel with a happy face from Maggie for Mo. She had written her name herself, although back then she always forgot the E off the end. Maggie looked at the clumsy lettering and put the little book back in the box. Mo had helped her with the bindings, of course. He had bound all her homemade books in brightly patterned paper, and he had given her a stamp for the others, so that she could print her name and the head of a unicorn on the title page, sometimes in black ink and sometimes in red, depending on how she felt. But Mo had never read aloud to her from her books. Not once. He had tossed Maggie up in the air. He had carried her around the house on his shoulders. He had taught her how to make a bookmark of a blackbird's feather, but he had never read aloud to her. Never once, not a single word. Never. Often she put books on his lap. Maggie just had to teach herself how to decipher the black marks and open the treasure chest. She straightened up. There was still a little room in the box. Perhaps Mo had a new book she could take, an especially big, fat, wonderful book. The door to his workshop was closed. Mo? Maggie pressed the handle down. The long table where he worked had been swept clean, with not a stamp or a knife in sight. Mo had packed everything. Had he been lying after all? Maggie went into the workshop and looked around. The door to the treasury was open. The treasury was really just a storage room, but Maggie had given the little cubbyhole that name because it was where her father stored his most precious materials, the finest leather, the most beautiful fabrics, marble paper, stamps to print patterns in gold on soft leather. Maggie put her head around the open door, and saw Mo covering a book with brown paper. It was not a particularly large book, and not easily fat. The green linen binding looked worn, but that was all Maggie could see, because Mo quickly hid the book behind his back, as soon as he noticed her. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. "I forgot." And for a moment Maggie was speechless with shock. Mo's face was dark. "I only wanted to ask if you had a new book for me. I've read all the ones in my room," and Mo passed his hand over his face. "Yes, of course. I'm sure I can find something," he said. But his eyes were still saying, go away, Maggie," and the brown paper cracked behind his back. "I'll be with you in a minute," he said. "I have a few more things to pack. Okay?" A little later he brought her 3 books, but the one he had been covering with brown paper wasn't one of them. An hour later they were taking everything out into the yard. Maggie shivered when she stepped outside. It was a chilly morning after that night's rain, and the sun hung in the sky like a pale coin lost by someone high up in the clouds. They had been living in the old farmhouse for just under a year. Maggie liked the view of the surrounding hills. The swallow's nest under the roof, the dried up well that yawned darkly as if it went straight down to the earth's core. The house itself had always been too big and drafty for her liking, with all those empty rooms full of fat spiders, but rent was low and Mo had enough space for his books and his workshop. There was a hen house outside, and the barn, which now only housed their old camper van, would have been preferred for a couple of cows or horses. Cows have to be milked, Maggie, Mo had said when she suggested keeping a couple. Very, very early in the morning, every day. Well, what about horses? She had asked. Even Pippi Longstocking has a horse. Oh, I love that book! And she doesn't have a stable. She's been happy with a few chickens or a goat, but they too had to be fed every day, and she and Mo went away too often for that. So Maggie had only the ginger cat, who sometimes came visiting when it couldn't be bothered to compete with the dogs on the farm next door. The grumpy old farmer who lived there was their only neighbor. Sometimes his dogs howled so pitifully that Maggie put her hands over her ears. It was 20 minutes by bike to the nearest village, where she went to school and where two of her friends lived. But Mo usually took her in the van because it was a lonely ride along a narrow road that there's a fly in here. Road that would pass nothing but fields and dark trees. What on earth have you packed in there? Bricks? Said Mo, as he carried Maggie's book box out of the house. You're the one who says books have to be heavy because the whole world's inside them, said Maggie, making him laugh for the first time that morning. The camper van standing in the abandoned barn like a solid, multicolored animal was more familiar to Maggie than any of the houses where she and Mo had lived. She never slept more deeply and soundly than in the bed he had made in it for her. There was a table, too, of course, a kitchen tucked into the corner, and a bench to sit on. When he lifted the seat of the bench, there were travel guides, road maps, and a well-torn paperback under it. Yes, Maggie was fond of the van, but this morning she hesitated to get in. When Mo finally went back to the house to lock the door, she suddenly felt they would never come back. Here, that this journey was going to be different than any other, that she would drive further and further away in flight from something that had no name, or at least none that Mo was able to tell her. Very well, off we go south, was all he said as he got behind the steering wheel, and so they set off without saying goodbye to anyone. On a morning that still seemed much too early, and smelled of rain, but Dustfinger was waiting for them at the gate. That's the end of chapter 3. Here's our picture. See? The crow. Oh, no, that's a swallow. Remember the swallow's nest and whatever. Stay tuned for tomorrow's chapter 3. And thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, comment, and like. And don't forget to dare to dream, guys. Bye!